Warning, following video may contain content and/or language which may be unsuitable for younger viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
It's 4 o'clock in Los Angeles. It's 5 o'clock in Sheboygan, Wisconsin. And it's 7 p.m. and we are live from Philadelphia. Hello, everybody. I'm Mad Dog Scipio. This is Mikey and the Mad Dog on a very special night. Monday night, Behind the Veil. What lurks behind the veil? Well, I got three guys that are going to try and tell us what lurks behind the veil. But before I get to them, welcome to Monday Nights Behind the Veil and Mikey and the Mad Dog. Mikey, how the hell are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, Angelo. I'm back in Jacksonville, Florida after a successful acting journey up in Connecticut. Had a great time up there. I'm really looking forward to our guests tonight, multiple guests, on a very interesting topic that I am new to. And I'm really looking forward to the experts here telling me more information about it because it's fascinating.
Absolutely. And I want to warn our audience to behave themselves because I got an FBI guy in the house tonight and I know where you live. So now, before we get into too much tonight, let me just tell everybody a little bit about tonight's show. This is a follow-up show to this amazing, amazing book. And if you have it, you know what I'm talking about. Alcatraz Escape by Ken Widner and Mike Lynch. And they bring with us tonight Stuart Fillmore. He is a retired FBI agent. As they bring Stuart, there goes this Stuart. And I'm going to start with Stuart tonight. We're going to do this. Stuart, I'm going to bring you up on the big camera tonight. Watch this. Check this out. I'm going to make you famous, kid.
Oh, wow. Okay.
My
condolences to the audience.
There you go. They got to deal with me every week. Don't worry about it, brother. Stuart, let me just, first of all, welcome you. You're the new guy in the house tonight. How did you get involved with Mike and Ken in earnest on this journey into Alcatraz?
Yeah, it's actually very interesting. We ended up on the same show, Expedition Unknown, a few years ago. That was just somewhat randomly, I guess, that we met. Obviously, Ken and Mike have the expertise of the case, especially Ken, because he's linked to it through his family. I had done some previous shows on Expedition Unknown, and I guess they liked me enough to invite me back. And so they called me and asked me if I knew anything about the escape from Alcatraz. And it's as we talked off air, Mad Dog, it's one of those things that I never worked officially in my capacity when I was in the FBI. I never did a thing with it. In fact, that case, the FBI closed that case in '79. I didn't get into the bureau until '87. But anyway, I just by luck got on that show. I met Ken and Mike. We all we're pretty simpatico as far as I think we all are very diligent about pursuing unsolved cases. This is one of the ultimate unsolved cases. I think we all just kind of realized we had a passion for this. It's even though, like I said, I had never worked on it before, I'd always been interested in it. I saw the Clint Eastwood movie back in 1979, Escape from Alcatraz, and I really just, for whatever reason, I'm drawn to unsolved cases. In my heart, I'm a puzzle solver, really more than an investigator, but I guess it's kind of the same thing. And so that's how we met. And then, lo and behold, I got involved with some other folks, Rob and Cindy Dorfman, on a totally separate case apart from Alcatraz. And I really don't even know Ken and Mike. I guess we've never really talked about it, but they had started working with Rob and Cindy, and I was working with them on a separate project. And at one point, I was filming with Rob and Cindy, and they asked me again what I thought about Alcatraz, and they said that they had some new developments, and that I might be interested in playing along with it. And so I said, absolutely, you got to be kidding. Yes, the answer is yes. And so that's how I got involved then, and so I got a chance to work with Ken and Mike again, and it's just been fantastic.
Beautiful. Well, tonight with newly discovered information and tangible physical assets, Ken Widner, Mike Lynch, and Stuart Fillmore, they're going to walk us through the planning, the execution, and the aftermath of what is still the most controversial prison escape in U.S. history. We'll address the long-running debate on whether these three guys actually made it across the alleged shark-infested waters of San Francisco Bay onto the mainland, and what happened when they got there. And I want to talk right now about the San Francisco Bay, because we got some people got some splaining to do, Lucy. I spoke to an oceanographer that works here at the Camden Aquarium, the New Jersey State Aquarium in Camden, New Jersey. And I am told that albeit there are sharks in the waters of San Francisco Bay, it is not the quote-unquote shark-infested waters that people believe it to be. There are meandering sharks that come in from deeper waters. This is true. But it's also true that it's entirely possible to make it off the rock once you get off, to swim a fairly short distance to shore. It's not all that far, So I want Ken, if you want, in fact, not if you, I'm going to bring you up here, brother. So watch.
Okay.
There you go. I'm going to bring you up here. Let's talk about this. What do you know about the waters surrounding Alcatraz in San Francisco?
Well, I can tell you that I personally swam it. I did the Escape from Alcatraz triathlon in 2016. And I can tell you that every year, 2,000 people do it. So it's not an impossible task. It's a 1.5 mile swim. If you had to do it, yes, you could do it. My two uncles were excellent swimmers. And if they had needed to do it, they could have done it. But to be honest with you, they never even got in the water much. I mean, they had a raft, they had a boat that was picking them up in the middle of the bay. So they pretty much, but the only time they ever really got in the water was when they entered the water just around the island and into the docks, and then probably transferring from the raft that they had into the boat that was meeting them. That was about their extent of the water. But I can tell you that, John and Clarence, especially Clarence, he had swam one time over 20-something miles in this Tampa Bay. So, did they have the ability to do it? And can you do it? Absolutely.
Mike, there is this misnomer over the years that, and I guess it's misnomer by publication, by creative license, by ignorance, perhaps, that John and Clarence and perhaps even Frank Morris made it, or allegedly. Let me back up. That John, Clarence, and Frank got off the island, made it into a boat, made it to the shore, but there was some indication as to whether they, and maybe Mike answered part of it, but whether they actually swam, because part of the misnomer is that these guys swam a bunch of it.
Right. Yes.
So can we kibosh that, and I think Ken, laid the groundwork for it. What do you know about how that kind of rumor got started? Where the miseducation came from?
Well, for most people who've done any research on Alcatraz, it's very well documented that actually there was a fourth inmate, Alan West, who was a part of the escape plan. The night of the escape didn't make it out in time. He did make it out eventually, but the three were long gone by then. And a lot of the inside information came from him. So the day after the escape, which was on June 12th, because they got out the night before on the 11th, he was interviewed by the FBI. They immediately took over the investigation on the 12th. They were brought onto the island because they have a field office in San Francisco, and they were notified, as were the police and other agencies, to start the search immediately. And he starts telling the authorities, primarily the FBI, what the initial plan was, that they were going to go to Angel Island, and that they had collected approximately 50 raincoats, 6 months prior to the escape, cut them and glued them together, and created a raft that Ken had alluded to, that they brought down to the water's edge of the island after they broke out of their cells. And then they started paddling towards what Alan West said was Angel Island. But with information that we've uncovered when we were doing research for the book, and Ken prior to that looking into the story, as was mentioned, that he's the nephew of John and Clarence, so he has a lot of family information, which I'm sure you'll get to shortly. So from very, very early on, it was already established that they had a raft, that they were paddling their way to freedom. The question is, which direction did they go, and what were the means by which they did escape with the raft? So the idea that they swam for it must have come much, much later, because a lot of the stories and biographies and books and so forth really focus on the tides of San Francisco Bay, which have very, very strong tides coming and going, depending on, what time of day it is. And could they have, if they tried to paddle their way to freedom, either going to the Golden Gate Bridge or to Angel Island or possibly San Francisco, at certain times of the day, they would have had a very, very difficult time making it to their destination, because the pull of the tides are so strong that you get sucked out, past the Golden Gate Bridge into the Pacific Ocean, never to be seen again. So that's where a lot of the stories really focus on. The investigation is, could they have paddled their way, not swam their way to freedom?
Mikey Messier, you are new to this one. This panel is open field for you, my friend. Choose anybody you want, any player among us.
I was fascinated in the book, the human elements. These guys were really smart, to put it mildly, to make this plan with the dummy heads, and they had to collect human hair by working in the barber shop in order to put on the dummy heads to confuse. Was it Herman the German, the security, the inmate guard who was fooled by the dummy heads, and just the ingenuity of these gentlemen and the trust they had with each other, and also, I guess, a supporting nod to the other inmates who nobody ratted them out, as the inmates would say, that they kept the code of silence for that well in order to not alert the guards, because you can see where an inmate might court favor with the system by ratting these guys out, but nobody did. Just the humanity of it. And then I guess I'm just curious about, what do you think, because you talk about the family, and basically since you were a child, you had to deal with the FBI coming to your home, and I think mildly harassing might be a good way of putting it, or just full-on harassment from the FBI, as far as asking questions and so forth, and trying to get information. But to kind of come full circle and eventually team up with those guys for some of these documentaries, what was that evolution like? Like, how did we get from feeling persecuted by the FBI or harassed by them to actively working with the authorities and trying to put this mystery together?
So I'm assuming you're asking me that question.
Yes.
being as my family was the one that was, harassed by the FBI early on. I remember all the stories that my grandparents My aunts and uncles talked about how the FBI was just so hounding them at the very beginning. You know, they would show up unannounced. Many times they would threaten them with, you know, if you know anything about your brother's whereabouts, if we find out that you've been involved in any way whatsoever, we're going to bring charges against you. You're going to prison. So they were pretty much like scared to death. Then in '79, when the U.S. Marshals took it over, they wasn't as heavy-handed as the FBI was, but they were still, you know, we knew they were there. And I've had a lot of people tell me I was crazy when I said, you know, I know our phones were being bugged. It would be later in 2015 when I was working with one of the U.S. Marshals that I would find out that my theory of our phones being bugged were true. I mean, he actually told me that, you know, they were still listening to our phone calls. I would be surprised that they're not physically listening right now, because even now, I know this will shock you, but we've had the U.S. Marshals approach us with what we already know, and they're wanting to know what we know, and we're refusing to kind of like tell them right this minute. The only thing I can say is there was a point in time in this story that we were not going to get some of the answers that I needed unless we started working with them. And so, you know, I was the one, well, actually, I had a U.S. Marshal one time approach me and ask me would I help him. I agreed. He agreed to exchange some information back to me for me helping him. I knew my uncles were already dead, so I didn't really believe that they were in any danger whatsoever. Most of my relatives had already passed away, the brothers and sisters. So I really didn't feel like there was anything to lose. Working with Stuart was probably one of the best things I ever did, because he had access into the FBI and how the FBI wrote stuff and their documents. And again, I've worked with, now I'm on my third U.S. Marshal. So I would say, you know, it was something that was a little scary at first, but I am so glad that we did it.
Well, that makes sense.
I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying that makes sense. I mean, it's really, I guess, just to give a little thought as far as the listener to the audiobook. And like I said, I feel like I'm new to this story, but I feel like you can't help as a civilian to kind of root for these guys to escape and go to Mexico or Brazil and have lives. And because it seems like their sentence was a bit harsh, very harsh for what they did. They robbed banks with a toy gun, or a bank with a toy gun. And it just seems like the penalty was more severe than necessary. And I think there's a little part of almost everybody, maybe not everybody, that has a really scary nightmare about going to prison. You know, I think I've never gone to prison as a culprit, but just that's a fear. Like, it would not be fun to be in prison. And you kind of think, if I was in that situation, would I have the balls, to put it frankly, to try and escape? And you find yourself impressed with these guys, like just kind of cheering for them and in awe. And it's maybe part of the American spirit is a rebellion, or just, you know, if you feel like you're being unjustly persecuted, to fight back and to find an escape. So in a sense, these guys are kind of anti-heroes. That's the way I interpreted it. Any thoughts from anybody on that?
Well, I just want to jump in and say, yes, you were correct that the brothers decided to rob a bank. There's a huge backstory about why they did that, because they grew up in Ruskin, Florida, which is just outside of Tampa. They were small timers, you know, local crimes, breaking into houses, stealing car batteries, breaking into stores for, you know, kind of pocket money. You know, they were, you know, just local guys, local criminals. You know, on the wrong side of the track. And then one day, again, for various reasons, they decided to rob a bank in Alabama, and they get caught. John was kind of dating this woman who was married, and through her husband, that's how they got found out by the FBI. They arrested them and were charged for robbing the bank, and which was obviously a federal crime. And in Alabama in the late 1950s, because this happened in 1958, January 58, and the trial took place just several weeks after they were arrested. And they were given, because they were very, very poor, they didn't have enough money for their own hire a lawyer. So they were given, public defender, who basically told them, if you confess to this crime, you'll get a few years, and for good behavior, a little bit less. So maybe like 3 to 5 years, they'd be out. Well, if they were going to go with the jury trial, they could have been charged with the death penalty. And they actually did try to charge them with the death penalty for robbing the bank. And the only reason that didn't happen because first they had the federal trial, they pled guilty, they were convicted, obviously. And then a couple of weeks later, the state of Alabama charged them for the same crime. And it was Alabama that wanted to execute them. And the only thing that saved them was some of the money that they used in the bank robbery. John had given to his brother, Robert, who was also known as Man. That was sort of his nickname in the family. And that $500 saved their lives because they were able to hire a lawyer who kept them from getting the death penalty. And instead, they got, all three of them got 40 years. Part of that is federal time, part of that is state time. And you had to serve your federal first and then state second. Well, just before they were being taken away to start serving their time, the prosecuting attorney threatened John and Clarence, and there was a third brother, Alfred, who was also involved in the bank robbery. And he basically said that when you finish your federal time and come back to do your state time, you're never going to get out. This is going to be your last stop. So basically he said, you're going to be killed in prison. And Frank Morris, who joined them in Alcatraz, they kind of knew each other a little bit. They kind of crossed paths in prison prior to Alcatraz. They already knew each other by the time Alcatraz comes along. He had a similar experience because he also robbed a bank, was later caught, and the prison he was going to be sent to essentially said the same thing, that they were going to kill him when he came back. So for all three of them, John, Clarence, and Frank Morris, they later said to prisoners in Alcatraz that they weren't escaping from Alcatraz, they were escaping from being sent back to the state prisons where they were going to be threatened to be killed. That's why they were highly motivated to escape Alcatraz.
I'll tell you what, Mike, the cast of characters in this Alcatraz saga reads like a who's who from Central Casting. It's utterly remarkable. I want to bring Stuart up here. Stuart, you're an FBI guy.
Yes.
Your job is evidence, solid evidence. But in so collecting the solid evidence, these pieces, these factoids of information, the other thing that you rely upon heavily as an effective agent with the FBI is your gut instinct, that inner voice tells you. Is this true? Is this bullshit? Am I being played? So all these questions come up.
Yeah.
Let me read something to you, Stuart.
Okay.
My name is John Anglin. I escaped from Alcatraz in June 1962 with my brother Clarence and Frank Morris. I'm 83 years old and in bad shape. I have cancer. Yes, we all made it that night, but barely. Frank Morris passed away in 2008. His grave is in Alexandria under another name, and my brother Clarence died in 2011. If you announce on TV that I will be promised, if you announce on TV that I will promise to go first to jail for no more than a year if I get medical attention, I will write back to you and let you know exactly where I am. This is no joke. This is for real and the honest truth. After the escape, I lived in Brazil, Northern California, and spent many years in North Dakota, in Fargo. But it was just too damn cold, and I understand. I've been there. I had to get the hell out of there. I lived in Seattle for many years after the escape. I now live in Southern California. Well, right soon, I'll be waiting for your response. Couple of things struck me when I read that to Ken and Mike the first time out loud. I truly believe, because my gut tells, I listen to my gut. My gut tells me that the guy who wrote this is willing to risk his identity. How can you do that if you're trying to pull the wool over somebody's eyes, number one? Number two, the idea of exposing yourself for medical treatment is absolutely as altruistic as you can get. That's like saluting the flag in my world. That's crazy good. Talk to me. Where does your head go? Where does your gut go? What does the evidence here tell you?
So I read that letter a few years ago for the first time. It was, like I said, it was nothing I ever did officially in the FBI, but I remember that letter. And one of the things that, because I'm always evaluating something is how can I independently corroborate this? What physical evidence, what is it there that I can take from this information and verify it and corroborate it independently of what he's saying? And he gives away a few things in there that would be a possibility. He lists a number of places where he lives. So that's, when I hear that, that's the first thing that where my mind goes is, how can I corroborate this? Just with some evidence that is independent of him. And like I said, there's several nuggets in there. But I agree with you. And I guess that's really something that, for me, going back to I probably had heard of the case before the Clint Eastwood movie, but that's when I really became aware of the full facts of it, I guess. And those type cases have always fascinated me. And I agree that for me as well, I've always had somewhat of a gut feeling that they made it. I agree with Mikey's description about how ingenious this thing was, how well it was planned and executed. And if you actually go to Alcatraz and you see it, you get a real appreciation for how well this was done. And so had I had the power of the emperor at that point, I would have just said, hey, let's do whatever it takes to get this guy in. I agree. These guys, there's a certain part of us that just kind of roots for them. They never killed anybody. They were in Alcatraz largely because they were so good at escaping. So no one's been hurt. It was a fantastically done escape. Let's settle this thing once and for all. Let's get this guy in. And I wouldn't even worry about giving him a year in jail. Let's get with him. Let's solve this thing and call it a day.
I'm with you on that one. I got to bring Ken up here. Ken, I mentioned a few moments ago before I went to Stuart that the cast of characters here, setting the stage for this dramatic play, this saga, really, this real life saga, the cast of characters, you can't make up people like this. You just can't, because factual information is far stranger than anything any writer can make up. The last time you and Mike were here, you mentioned a guy, and I talked about my feelings about this fella. You mentioned a guy named Fred Breezy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I can't shake Fred Breezy from my brain for a couple of reasons. He infiltrated the Anglin family. He became close to the Anglin family. Sat down with your with John and Clarence's mother. Is that what it was?
It was their brothers and sisters.
Okay. Sitting down at the table with them while the tape recorder's going. So he's clearly got nothing to hide.
No. Well, go ahead.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, please.
Well, so something that few people know is that Fred Breezy was friends with John and Clarence since childhood. He went to one of the boys' reform school with them. He never went to any state prisons with them, but he did grow up with them. So it wasn't something that, he just all of a sudden out of the wild came to tell the family. And the interesting story about Fred Breezy was Fred didn't come to the family to share this story. My Uncle Man, who we later, and I kind of always knew he was involved in some way with the escape. We just didn't know how until much later on. He's the one who brought Fred Breezy to meet with the Anglin siblings, his brothers and sisters. And it was actually that he came and met with them twice. The first time, my mom, who was there, didn't have a tape recorder to record it. But on the second meeting, for whatever reason, she decided she was going to bring her tape recorder, and she recorded a 45-minute interview that he gave where he talks about, going down to Brazil and his involvement with the escape. And, I've had people say, well, he's a liar. He didn't really kind of know what he was saying. But he actually shared information that was only revealed in the FBI files. And now this is 1992. And the FBI files were not released until like 2003, 2004. So he was sharing information that he should have not have known. So that to me backs up a lot of credibility. And some of the information he tells is only, he didn't give like general information, like if someone was lying, if you were telling a story and you really didn't, really wasn't true, you're not going to give detailed type information. And he did on a couple of the pieces of the story. He went into great detail about what happened. So he was definitely there. He was part of it. He was the pilot who flew them out that night. So, he knew them. He was a pilot. He was part of the escape.
You just mentioned that he was a pilot, which we discovered that in the last episode when you guys were here. There is a very interesting, yet still to this day, very controversial photo that purports to show John and Clarence in front of a large mound in Brazil. It is said that Fred Breezy flew them to Brazil. If you believe the story, and I believe that story. How long, to your knowledge, and anybody that has knowledge can answer this question, how long, to your knowledge, did they stay in Brazil? How long was it before they left? Did Fred Breezy go back to retrieve them and take them out? Or did they find their own way out of the country? Because that's the question I don't have the answers to.
Well, I do know somebody does. I do know that Fred Breezy flew them back into the country multiple times. They did come back when my grandfather was sick and was about to die. He died in 89. And I do know that it is reported that Fred flew them back a couple of times. Now, how do I know that they survived or stayed in Brazil? This show is going to bring up, I can't go into some of the detail of what's going to be in the show that's airing on the Discovery Channel. But we do believe that, and this is where this letter kind of really changed my opinion of it. We believe that Clarence actually did die in 2011. I'm not sure he was in Brazil when he died, but we do believe he died in 2011. We do believe that John died in 2016 of some type of a cancer issue. And this show is going to kind of bring this more in focus, even to the point, and I will share this, if what we have found, we actually might even know where John is buried in Brazil.
The idea that someone would empty their heart in their final years to ask for help, risking being caught being captured, being sent back to prison, tells me a lot about that person. It tells me at this point in their life, they're done running. They're not hiding anymore. They're clearly willing to make themselves visible. And as Stuart and I discussed, what's the end game? This is it. What's the end game? The end game is, hey, fellas, here I am. I'm sick. I need your help. There's no, how do I want to say this? There's no play here.
No.
You know what I'm saying? There's no play here. This is for real. This is real life. So if you believe, and I absolutely stand with you, if you believe that he's buried and passed in Brazil, which I'm all but certain he is, in fact, I may even be certain that he is, based on the picture, if you really take a good look at that picture, forensically, he does not look well. He looks like John Anglin, but he looks like an ill John Anglin, just like Clarence looks like a much older version of his younger self. Clearly, but they still resemble who they are. There are certain features, Stuart, you're an FBI guy. There are certain features that you can't fix surgically, that they are who they are.
Yeah.
When you saw that photograph, give me your guttural instinct, your first visceral reaction. What did you think?
Oh, I thought it was them. That's the first reaction. Obviously, I think that picture we estimate was sometime maybe in the mid 70s. So I'm not sure if that at that point that John would have been sick, but because I'll disagree a little bit in that they both look fairly healthy to me, that they hadn't missed any meals. But the thing that when you're talking forensically, the thing that it fits. They're about the same size. They're a little older, a few more pounds on them. They've grown their hair out. But beyond that, this is where I told you I start looking for stuff I can corroborate and stuff that maybe folks just don't look at initially. But if you look at the records that identifying marks on Clarence, he had a tattoo on his inner left wrist, and the dark-headed fella in the photograph, you can see his left wrist. There is some type of a shadow. There's I'm calling it a shadow, but there's a dark object on his wrist that actually is a little too dark for a shadow. Unfortunately, the resolution's not clear enough to get close enough to see if it actually is this tattoo. But it definitely is darker than a shadow, and it's consistent with where we know Clarence had a tattoo. So that's the way I'll start looking at evidence like this. I know that we've done some high tech stuff, analyzing facial recognition and that kind of stuff. That's a little out of my expertise, and I know it's been matched forensically. With the facial recognition to a very high degree of certainty, which is almost like an electronic lineup. And so, but overall, my gut feeling is that's them. We don't know of anyone that's ever, that photo's been out for many years. We don't know of anyone else that's come forward and says, that's not the Anglin brothers. That's me. It's my brother, Joe. And, so no one has ever acknowledged that they were the ones in the photo.
Remarkable. Mikey Messier, you are up, brother.
For Ken and Mike, I have a question, and then one for Stuart. For Ken and Mike, is there any suspicion that the two brothers, your two uncles, had children or relationships with women in Mexico or Brazil? Is there any trail that would lead to some type of cousin for you from your uncles?
Well, yeah, so I can answer that. The only information that we had about my cousins or their children came from Fred Breezy. He did acknowledge to their brothers and sisters that I believe it was Clarence that had, I believe it was 4 children, and John with 3 children. They both, according to him, married. We do believe, and this show is going to bring out some new information, that we've come very close to tracking down some of those relatives. I'm not going to say, anything else other than that we are in the hot pursuit of it. So that's, definitely they had children. So.
Okay. And then I had one question for Stuart, which is, I'm trying to get this right, but there was something in the documentary that I watched that said that these gentlemen would have been, I don't want to say pardoned, but at the age of 99, that the case would be resolved somehow, because if they reached the age of 99 and were then caught or turned themselves in, that they wouldn't go to jail. I'm sure I'm getting that a little mixed up, but can you expand upon that 99 and why the significance of the age 99? Is it just because it's pretty old, or why did they choose 99 as opposed to 97 or 95 or 102? You see what I'm saying?
I think just generally, I think it's just thought that, at the age of 99, someone is either going to be dead or certainly infirm to the point where they, where it's just maybe cruel and unusual punishment to seek, further prison time for them. Although that said, I know on another project I'm working on, I did a little research. In 2022, there was a 102-year-old former Nazi that was convicted and put in prison. But I don't, to be perfectly honest, I don't know the actual legal reason behind that the charges disappear after the age of 99. Like I said, I think just logically, I never had a case where that was an issue at all, so I just can't speak to it from experience. So I'm guessing that it's just that the person's is assumed dead, or they're just too old to put in prison.
Yeah.
Mike Lynch.
Yes, sir.
Mike Lynch. Hold on, Mikey Messi. I'm going to go back to you in a second, but I got to do this real quick. Mike Lynch, you're the guy that kind of like, you're the connect the dots guy in this district.
Yep.
So I'm going to ask you to do just that for me. I mentioned a moment ago, cast of characters reads like a who's who of, central casting here. So I want to throw some names at you and connect the dots for me.
Okay, do it.
Warden Odin Blackwell, Fred Breezy, Mickey Cohen, James Whitey Bulger, the Anglin brothers, Frank Morris, Bumpy Johnson, the godfather of Harlem.
Yep.
Charles German, Herman the German,
Yep.
Alan West, and put it together for me. These crazy kooky guys.
Yeah. So Mickey Cohen was a very well-known mobster in the Los Angeles area for many years.
Yep.
And he actually knew the brothers prior to Alcatraz. He was a drug guy. That was one of his means of being an underworld figure. And he and the brothers lived in Florida in farming community, and they were expert farmers, and they can grow anything basically. And it was actually through Fred Breezy, who we've already talked about a little bit. He worked with Mickey Cohen as one of his drug pilots. It's very well documented that he flew drugs out of Central and South America for many years. And he actually had a nickname. He was known as Waterbed Fred, because what he used to do was he used to have the twin turboprop planes that go a couple 100 miles an hour, which, back in the day, in the late 50s, that was pretty fast for a plane, for a private plane. And what he used to do was he'd literally get the bladder from a waterbed, and he put it in the plane and siphon up the gasoline into his engine so that he can basically double his flight time in the air. He didn't have to land. He can go from somewhere in America down to Central South America without having to refuel. So he had developed sort of this little primitive technology of flying further than he should have in a turboprop plane. So Fred Breezy connects the brothers to Mickey Cohen in the 50s. They start growing marijuana for him on their farm, which they were actually caught by their father. Their father caught them growing the marijuana. They weren't drug users. They were just drug growers. That was for them, it was all about the money. They wanted the money because they wanted to live a better life. That's why they were committing small crimes growing up, because they just wanted the good things of life they didn't have. And then eventually they do get caught, robbing the bank. And then they're eventually sent to Leavenworth. John and Clarence try to escape from Leavenworth. They get caught. And then that's what gets them to Alcatraz. So Alcatraz was not their first escape. They had done it many times before over the years. So they go to Alcatraz. Eventually, Mickey Cohen is arrested for tax evasion, convicted. He's sent to Alcatraz. Well, another person who was waiting for him at Alcatraz was Whitey Bulger, who was also a very infamous Boston mobster. And he was at Alcatraz at that time. The brothers didn't know Whitey Bulger. They met him through Frank Morris. Now, like I said, Frank Morris and the brothers crossed paths a little bit in Florida area because he had, he was also kind of a small timer for a lot of years and then tried to rob a bank. And so they meet up again in Alcatraz. And then, of course, Bumpy Johnson, as you said, the godfather of Harlem, he knew Mickey Cohen because Mickey Cohen was originally from New York. And Mickey Cohen was Jewish. Bumpy Johnson was African American. So they had the New York connection, they had the mobster connection, and they also had the connection of prejudice, of what it was, for them growing up, how they had to deal with personal prejudice. So they had a lot in common, and they had a friendship at Alcatraz, which was very unusual because Alcatraz, for its entirety, was a segregated prison. The black inmates were kept in one part of the prison, the white inmates in the other part, and when they were in the exercise yard, they didn't mix. They kept to themselves, except for Mickey and Bumpy. They would walk around the yard, and both groups would be kind of upset about that because there was a lot of prejudice in the prison. And because these were very powerful men, nobody touched them and they let it go. And they were very open with their friendship. And then you have Herman the German. That was Whitey Bulger. Ken was able to sort of build a friendship with him when he was in Boston. He escapes. He was going to be arrested by the FBI. He's on the lam for 16 years, and then eventually he gets caught and then sent back to prison for his various crimes. And during that time, Ken connected with Whitey Bulger, and for several years they wrote letters to each other. Ken asking him a lot of questions about Alcatraz because he was there with the brothers. He was very good friends with them. He held them in the highest regard, was very respectful of who they were and what they did. He openly praised them for the escape and how he said, John and Clarence and Frank didn't escape. We all escaped at the same time. If that's how he felt about it. And he talked about Herman the German. His real name was Charles Herman. He was one of the guards, and he was there that night, the night of the escape. He was on the floor doing his rounds the night of the escape, and ultimately he was blamed for the escape because just before he went off duty around midnight the night of the escape, he was behind in his guards had various jobs they had to do during their shift, and he was behind in his duties, and he didn't do everything that he did. So when he signed out, he said that he checked them. There was a bed checks at certain times. Well, after the escape, he didn't do his bed check and was later blamed, saying that if you had done your bed check at the right time, we would have realized that he had escaped that night and not the next morning. And he felt very resentful that he was the whole blame of the escape was on his shoulders, and he was suspended for 30 days. And he stayed with the prison, and he retired a year and a half later when the prison closed. He moved to Arizona with his wife, and he's actually, as far as we know, he's still alive. And I spoke to him on the phone about a year ago and asked him, about his experience with Alcatraz, and he was proud of being a guard and what he did, but he was very resentful, very bitter about, even all these years later, about being blamed for the escape.
Mike, he would have to be nearing 100 years old.
He's, I think, 94, 95. So he's an elderly gentleman, but his mind is still sharp. He remembers everything.
Wow. Remarkable. I have a connection to the story. I've mentioned it before to Ken and Mike. But I now have to do this for the benefit of Stuart Fillmore and Mikey Messier. I am here alive and well today because of Mickey Cohen.
Oh, well, nice.
And I will tell you how and why.
Yeah.
My father, when I was a baby, needed the money desperately to save my life. I needed life-saving surgery. I was born without a soft spot on my head. And there was only one surgeon that was able to do that job. He happened to be a Jewish guy named Dr. Eugene Spitz. And Dr. Spitz knew Mickey Cohen. And he gave Mickey Cohen's contact to my father. Without asking a dime in return, Mickey Cohen gave my father every penny he needed and then some, and continued to be a friend of the family for a very long time. And I am here because of two wonderful Jewish guys in my crazy little Italian world, Dr. Eugene Spitz and Mickey Cohen.
That's a great story.
That is a great story.
Yeah, it's you can't make this shit up, Stu. You just can't. You just can't.
Well, I believe it.
Can't.
I
I've
believe
told that story many, many times. I've never told Mike Messi, and then now you know, Stu.
Yeah.
Mikey, questions for the crew?
It's such a fascinating story, and I guess I always go back to the family and just thinking the stress of the brothers and the sisters and the people, the parents that the Anglin brothers and Frank left behind. And I don't know if there's any justice for those families, I guess, because they're kind of, the term guilt by association comes up, and it's unfair, but you guys, as the family, you had a lifetime of harassment because of something that you really didn't do. It wasn't your fault, and
Right.
and it's just that lethal lottery that is life. We don't choose our parents, we don't choose our uncles and aunts and so forth. And I guess I'll just, as on a personal level, did that experience as a kid and into your teens and 20s, do you think that gave you a bit of a chip on your shoulder? I mean, it would for me, so I'm just kind of personalizing how I would take that. But having your family kind of persecuted, harassed, questioned, whatever term we want to put on that type of activity, did that give you a rebellious streak? Did that give you, or did that make you perhaps conform more to society or to expectations of society because you saw what would happen if you went against it? How did that affect your life? I'm curious.
Well, I will say that I didn't really kind of talk about my uncles too much growing up. The only people that really knew that I was related to John and Clarence was, very close friends. I never really kind of talked about it during my adolescent years or high school years. That was kind of the time frame where you just really wanted to kind of get through life and not have something tagged upon you in school. Oh yeah, you're related to these criminals. And it wasn't until much later that I pretty much started kind of embracing it and openly talking about it. I do remember the U.S. Marshals coming to the house, talking to my mom. Before that, it was the FBI. I remember going to my grandmother's funeral and, knowing that there were FBI agents there at the funeral, especially at my grandfather's funeral. I don't remember my uncle Alfred. I was only around 3 when he died. But the stories that my aunts and uncles have told about that funeral, there were FBI agents at that funeral also. So it's almost kind of like we grew up with this, knowing that we were being watched, knowing that we were being followed, knowing that people were wanting to know, because, they wanted to know where my uncles were. And they tried everything that they could to pry it out of my aunts and uncles. And they were successful enough not to reveal it to anyone until they knew that their brothers were safe and could never have been touched by the authorities. So, yeah, I mean, it was something that I dealt with. And every time we went home for family reunions, it was as a kid hanging out with my other cousins. We always knew that our aunts and uncles were always, didn't matter what we were doing, we could always, some conversation came up with the adults about John and Clarence. they bring it up. Oh, I remember, and they used to call John J.W. His name was John William Anglin, but for the longest time, I thought that was his name, J.W., because that's all they referenced by him. It was Clarence J.W. And same thing with my Uncle Man. I didn't even know that his real name was Robert Anglin for years. I thought his name was Man. That's all I ever heard. And so, a lot of these stories were ingrained and have been ingrained in my memory. And that's when I started working with Mike. I was relaying and regurgitating everything that I remember my aunts and uncles talking about, every story they shared, everything that they experienced with the law enforcement, and everything that they experienced with items that John and Clarence sent back to them to let them know they were okay.
Yeah, and it's such a thing that the government, the official story was that these guys died at sea. They drowned or got eaten by the sharks. But meanwhile, they're coming after the family, left and right. It does at the end of your book, your fascinating book. You talk about the different, and I related to this on a very personal level, like the frustrations of having this fascinating multi-tiered story that could be produced as a film, a more historically accurate film than the Clint Eastwood film. Exactly. And how you wanted to kind of represent these guys as fully developed human beings, not just as guys that escaped from Alcatraz, and really give a full character study of them. And I definitely related to that, of having a great idea for a story and just the frustration of different networks and so forth. The roller coaster ride that is film production or television production. I related to that. So I give you a lot of credit for and Mike for helping you and being your point man on this, because it's a story that deserves to be told. If people haven't read it or listened to it on Audible or audiobook, I suggest they do, because there's a lot of layers to this story, isn't there?
Oh, yes. And Stuart, I'd love for him to chime into this, because as we were digging through the mounds of pieces of evidence, and I started noticing that there was a story within this Alcatraz story. And, I think Stuart saw it early on also, because some of these characters, I'm not saying John and Clarence or Frank Morris was involved in it, but a lot of these other characters that they knew and were involved in this Alcatraz case was also somehow linked to another story in history. And Stuart can talk about that one.
That was that other project that I mentioned earlier. And so, Mad Dog, you mentioned that there's this cast of characters, and you rattled off several names a minute ago: Widner, Mickey Cohen, Bumpy Johnson, all these guys. There's a couple of other names that actually are also in this story, and that is a female stripper back in the day named Candy Cane, and Candy Bar, and Jack Ruby. Many people out there may know the name Jack Ruby.
Club owner and a stripper.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so their association is also in this, and this is something that that we have looked at. We've talked about. It's probably something that we're gonna delve into at some point once we get this show going. But there's just a lot more here that meets the eye. For instance, there's another thing that popped up in the course of this in the FBI file. There was a report from 1965 that FBI reports have what are called case titles on them, and usually it's the name of the individual. So let's say if it was John Dillinger, the case is John Dillinger, bank robbery, and some other just administrative stuff on it. Sometimes the case title may be like an operation, like Operation Greylord, something like that. If it's a bigger case and there's more than one subject. In the course of this report went out from the office in Rio de Janeiro. It's called the Legal Attaché, or a LEGAT. And
I know it.
a fugitive had actually been caught in Brazil at that time, and the case title of it was bail jumper. So typically in a fugitive case, the case title is gonna be the name of the fugitive, because that's all the case is about. There's a fugitive, there's a guy on the run. This is who he is, and that's it. I've never seen a fugitive case have a code name like bail jumper. But anyway, the information that the agent that wrote this report was sending out was, we just apprehended this fugitive, and it appears there's a lot of fugitives that are coming to Brazil. There was no extradition at the time, and so he sent out this report just to other FBI offices that had prominent fugitive cases, and obviously the Alcatraz case was still very prominent in 1965. And he's just saying, hey, think about this, that if you have a fugitive, you may think about that they might be in Brazil. And so there was quite a bit of information in that related to the Alcatraz, but there was also quite a bit redacted on it. And I thought that the redaction would have been because this report came from the Alcatraz file. And so anything that was not responsive to Alcatraz would have been redacted. So I thought, well, I'll just do kind of an end run and do a freedom of information request and get this this file on this bail jumper, whatever this case was, and so I'll specifically request it for that case because we had the case file number and and the case title. Well, that came back is that that's restricted for national security reasons. And I think you tried it as well. You did your own FOIA request on it.
Yep.
And got the same thing. I cannot understand in any reason, and I don't agree with a lot of the redactions. And I believe in full transparency. I don't have anything to hide. So I don't understand why a fugitive case from 1965 would have any kind of national security interest in 2026. There's absolutely none. And so that is a little bit of a mystery that I think is another thing that we want to pursue beyond the stuff that we've learned in the show. And so the show has been fascinating. We're going to reveal some really, really cool stuff, but we've also found quite a few more unanswered questions that need answering, and so that's where we're going to go with it. But the specific involvement of Jack Ruby is also very interesting to this case.
Let's talk about a little program called MK Ultra and a guy named Sidney Gottlieb and a guy named Alan Dulles and a guy named John Kennedy and what happened there and how did MK Ultra, and by the way, I've done 4 shows on MK Ultra. I've had 7 participants of the MK Ultra program on my show, or what's left of their minds, I should say. Wow. And it is a devastating program. It's also highly profitable. Talk to me. I guess I'm going to maybe go with Stuart on this one. I'm going to bring you back with this one, yep. Stuart. Talk to me about MK Ultra and how it plays into Alcatraz.
So I'm not the best expert on MK Ultra. When I mentioned earlier, we kind of alluded to this other project that I've been on. I'm actually looking into the Kennedy assassination from a forensic and ballistic standpoint. I've been on it.
May I stop you there for just a moment because I want to say something to you very important.
Yes,
and it's already on our show docket. I've got a John F. Kennedy show coming up with never before seen film. I would love you to be on that show with me. Yeah. I also have another show coming up inside the 5 families of the mafia and I have a former hitman coming on the show, a reformed hitman named Louis Ferranti, Big Lou Ferranti. I was going to have my friend John A. Light on the show, but John is actually in jail right now. He has gotten arrested again. Can't help it, folks. It just happens, you know. Look, when you play with matches, you're going to get burnt, you know. It's just the way it is. But I would love for you to be on that show. And after this show is over, I would love for you to stay around for a minute if you can.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, so
but
continue, please.
yeah, but so on that thought, again, I've focused mainly on the forensic and the ballistic evidence. There's something in that case called the single bullet theory. It's kind of complicated to explain if you don't know the background of it, but essentially, if the single bullet theory fails, it means that Oswald could not have acted alone. He could not have been the lone gunman. And that's where the work that I've focused on. And I can tell you that the single bullet theory fails ballistically and forensically. I've uncovered my own stuff that is original on it, and it's quite devastating to the case. And for me, it's one of the things that I've encountered in the course of this case is the stuff that I've found. I've done a lot of forensic reconstructions and some ballistic testing. The guys on the ground that would have been just like me, they had to have known it at the time. It's unmistakable to me that they had to have known it and realized that this thing did not work ballistically. And I've found other things within the Kennedy case, the assassination, where the FBI either perjured themselves, destroyed evidence, obstructed justice, published a misleading photo. And the thing is, I was lucky, blessed, and proud to have gotten into the FBI. I had a great career. No one ever asked me to do anything illegal. I never saw anything illegal done. No one ever asked me to not pursue a logical course of an investigation. But one of the things that they drilled into us was if you see something illegal or unethical, and it certainly happens, in the case of Mark Putnam, an agent who was in Pikeville, Kentucky in the early 90s, he killed an informant. So, absolutely FBI agents do wrong things. I was lucky. I just never directly encountered it. But that said, we were under oath to that if we saw something illegal or unethical by another FBI employee, we had to report it. And so I've seen it in this Kennedy case from my own direct work. I'm not going to pull any punches about it. I'm not going to minimize it. It is what it is. It shouldn't have happened. And so in the course of that, so a lot of these, when in trying to find an explanation for why, if in other words, if this single bullet theory fails, and it means ballistically there's another shooter. So if you start thinking about that, well, who was the shooter? What does this bring into? That's when I started looking into a lot of this stuff that, frankly, I didn't believe before. And MK Ultra is one of those things, and there's just no doubt about it. And I think if you want to look at a better example of it, rather than the JFK assassination, is the RFK assassination, where Sirhan, also that's another case where ballistically he could not have fired the fatal shot. He, to this day, I think, acknowledges I was there. Yeah, I pulled the trigger, but I have no memory of it. And that is exactly what the MK Ultra program was designed for, to have assassins out there that would do the job and not be linked to anything. And so it absolutely was real. It absolutely, as far as I know, it's still continuing.
In fact, it is still an active program. Just for the record, it did not end in 1977 when it was purported to have ended. I will tell you factually, with 1,000% certainty, that it is still ongoing. It is still very highly funded, and its scope is not only national but international.
Yeah. I don't have any doubt about it. Fortunately, my eyes have been open to some things that I didn't see for a long time. And it just took me doing the work myself to actually start going down these trails. And I really kind of question everything now, to be quite frank.
Stuart, I've had these people on the show, and they're not afraid to talk. They're not afraid to talk. If it's wrong, they're going. I got people who risked their employment, who risked their livelihood and their lives, came on the show and talked about what they know. But you know what? It's like they say, the truth will set you free.
Yes.
The truth will set you free. You just speak the truth. And that's what we do here. Behind the Veil is one of those programs that Mikey and I are very, very proud to consider as part of the Mikey and the Mad Dog Show, because what we do is essential. Free speech is absolutely critical. Without free speech, there is no free society. And so we very much believe in that. Mikey Messier, I am going to let you close the show out, my friend. Final round of questions for you.
I'm just fascinated by this story. And like I said, I can't help but cheer for these guys and what they went through, the making of the exit and the strategy and the trust they had in each other. It does make you root in a sense for the bad guys, but maybe they aren't so bad after all. I think Ken said it in the book that these guys are human beings with families that cared about them, that they cared about. In order to make this escape, they had to never see their families again. I guess I'll ask each of you the same question, which is, if you could have the one message go out to the public about this story, a through line or just a theme, something that people could take away from if they're going to invest their time into reading this book and watching these documentaries, what would you kind of guide them into thinking about, a theme or a moral of this fascinating story? Maybe we'll start with Mike and then Ken and then Stuart.
So one of the things that's interesting about the story is, like I mentioned before, they grew up very, very poor. They were harassed, bullied, made fun of by kids growing up, and it really pushed them into making bad decisions of like, fine, if you're going to be this way with us, well, we don't care about you, and we're going to live how we want to live and have the good things of life. And so they became petty criminals. And eventually they graduated to bank robbery, and then they were sent to federal prison, which later they escaped and made their way to Brazil. And when they were in Brazil, they became law-abiding citizens, of all things. That they eventually got the life that they wanted, that they aspired to. But as was mentioned, it was at great cost. That one of the things that Whitey Bulger said in one of his letters is, if you're going to escape, you can never reach out to the family ever again. They did do that, but in a clandestine way where they never got caught. But he said you have to break all contact with them, because that's your Achilles heel. That's the way the authorities are going to catch you, is if you connect with the family. And so they took that very seriously, and they reached out in ways that they still maintained contact with from a distance. So they never did see their family again, except for their brother man. But they became model citizens. They never got into trouble after that. They were farmers. They hired workers to work their farms. They used to sell their produce in local markets. Eventually, John retires and goes to another place and lives a very comfortable life. And as Ken mentioned, they had wives and children in their lives. And so it took a long time, but they finally got what they wanted out of life, a good life.
What do you think, Ken? Going into this story, if people are to read the book, what would you like to kind of guide them in their thoughts?
I would say, throw out everything you think you know about Alcatraz and the escape, and look at this as a love story. Because as we wrote this, it really is a love story between John Anglin and his girlfriend, Helen. Everything that he did throughout up until for the bank robbery. He actually robbed that bank for his girlfriend, Helen. And so it really truly is a love story. And I know that's hard to kind of believe, but when you read it, you'll see what I'm talking about. I would definitely say, don't believe, I love the Clint Eastwood movie. I love Clint Eastwood. The only thing that they got right about that show was the spelling of Alcatraz. Definitely go into this with an open mind, and everything we bring backed up by evidence. And I promise you'll love the story.
And Stuart, the same question for you.
Yeah. So one thing that I just wanted to say is that I know that to the family, it certainly was harassment. unfortunately, when you have a fugitive case, the primary means of working that case is focus on the family, because most people, I don't care what level of criminal you are, everybody wants to go home. Everybody wants to have family and go back to family, and so that's just where the work has to focus when it's a fugitive case. And I understand that is very difficult on the family, and it's just an unfortunate situation. The human element of this. So in 29 years in the FBI, one thing that I learned, you talk in terms of good guys and bad guys, and certainly you have people that break the law. It's not quite that cut and dried at all. The vast majority of people that get involved in crime, like the Anglin brothers robbing a bank, it's usually out of some necessity, that just where it's just circumstances in their life kind of push them to this. They make a bad decision, a bad choice. It compounds from there. But as far as being human beings, that they're not, it doesn't mean that they're bad people. Most of the people that I encountered as criminals, so to speak, at their core were not bad people. Luckily, I only in those many years only encountered a couple of people that I would say, didn't have a soul, that were absolute evil. So I kind of root for these guys. I think, like I said, I think it was a fantastically executed plan, and they did it well. They were geniuses in it. They didn't hurt anybody. There's no indication that they did anything after that, but just become normal people. And so, the human side of this story is really, to me, what is compelling about it. And it's just, in a way, I'd say that that's just kind of cool that they made it.
Mikey, it's that time, man. I would love to do this all night, because these guys are a fascinating crew to talk to. When you guys finally get an air date for this series, please hit us up. I want to be the first one to jump on this ship. We have to. I am too invested in this story. You realize this is the 5th time you've been here? Yes. 5 times, okay? I'm deeply invested into this. I've got my heart and soul in this, man.
I can say this, that the show is going to be on Discovery Channel. It's hopefully going to come out around November. They're still working on the episodes. It's going to be multi-episodes as far as we know. And when it comes out in November, we're going to shout it from the mountaintops.
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you what, boy. Leave it to Widner, Lynch, and Fillmore. I'm going to tell you what, man. It's these guys are like, how do we want to call this, Messier? What are we going to call these guys?
Well,
are they our posse now?
Well, I think they're
guys. 3 makes up a posse, right?
Yeah, they're truth seekers. I mean, they're seeking the truth, and
yes,
that's what I would call it. I mean, I think
I'm going to tell you what, like I said before, the truth will set you free. I think even in absentia, even in memoriam, we have to free John, Clarence, and even Frank Morris, for that matter. We have to free them of this bondage of guilt that has trapped them for so many years. Okay, were they good guys? They did a couple of things wrong in their life. None of them were really hardened guys. Let's be honest about it. None of them were really hardened. They were just, if they're guilty of anything, they're guilty of being a little stupid from time to time.
Yeah,
right.
That's all.
Yeah, that's it.
I mean, if stupidity were a crime, I would be serving a life sentence, brother. I'm going to tell you now. I'll just tell you straight up. And by the way, Ken, don't feel bad, my friend. I'm Italian. Every time somebody dies, the FBI shows up in our house. Shut up, Stuart. On that note, my friends, before we do anything, you guys have anything else to plug, either individually or together? Go for it now. Let it rip.
Well, I will say that, Mike and I have done a podcast with Rob and Cindy Dorfman for the last, year and a half. And we go into great detail, even more so than the book. And it's called My Uncle's Escaped Alcatraz, and it's on Partners in True Crime. And I would just say, anyone who wants to get more information, Stuart's been on there several times. We've had several of the U.S. Marshals on there. We've actually had someone who spent time with Whitey Bulger in prison on there. I would just say, if you really want to dig deep into this story, check out those podcasts.
It's
Well,
also
I'll
on
tell you what,
YouTube.
why don't you invite Mikey and the Mad Dog on your show? We'd love
Oh, we
to
would
have that.
love to.
Yeah.
Love to. Absolutely.
Oh, hit us up. Absolutely. We'll come on.
Okay.
Mike Lynch, what do you got? Promote something for me.
Well, my writing also goes into the film community, and so I have written a couple of scripts, feature-length feature films that I'm working with producers that are shopping it around.
I want you to know that Mike Messier just sat straight up when you said that.
Is there a part of it
Mike,
for me?
you're talking to a guy. Mikey is a guy. This is legit, fellas. He is a multi-award-winning actor, producer, writer, director. He shared the screen with Meryl Streep, Wesley Snipes, Frances McDormand, Eric Roberts, most recently. And he just came back from Rhode Island on a new movie that'll be out in about a year.
Nice.
And he's a hell of a director and he's a hell of a screenwriter. So maybe Mikey, you want to get with Mike Lynch? I'll give you his contact info, his email. You can hook up with him. In the meantime, I'm going to abscond with Stuart, and we're going to talk about the good old days. So, Stuart, you have anything to promote? Social media, email, anything like that, where people can get you?
Yeah, right here. I have a podcast called Back in Crime. I do that with a retired Secret Service friend of mine. And we just talk about, it's a play on words, back in time, back in crime. We talk about these type cases, these old unsolved cases, and go in depth on some of those. We have a TikTok channel called the Texas Crime Travelers. We mainly comment on more modern stuff. Some of the stuff going on now.
I got a treasure trove of stories for you, brother. Let me know.
Yeah.
Bring me on. I'll tell you.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh,
absolutely. And I'm about 95% finished with the manuscript on my work on the JFK case. I have a literary agent that's currently pitching that now. Hopefully, that will land. Although it's very technical stuff, but it's in those technical details where the fact that this couldn't have happened the way the government told us really jumps out at you. So so check it out.
The book is Alcatraz, The Last Escape. I will tell you, if you pick it up, you will not put it down until it's finished, as did happen with yours truly. On behalf of Ken Widner, Magic Mike Lynch, Stuart, the G-Man. I love this guy. Mikey Messier, I am the Mad Dog. Check with us tomorrow night when we will talk all things Elvis from Elvis Week in Memphis, Tennessee. Billy Starling's the spa guy will be with us. Until then, like Papa DeCipio always said, tomorrow is promised to no one, so be good to somebody today. Make today count, folks. Until we see you again, Lord willing, and the creek don't rise, God bless. Be careful, be safe, take care.